Hi everyone. Today I would like to do a quick FAQ on loops. So we're going to continue working with the shell script that we had before. I have changed a little bit, so right now all it says is echo 2x2 hands of blue. So if we run this script, it's just going to say that. Now, what I'd like to do is actually put this into a loop so that it will say this 3 times. There's a couple different ways that you can do this. You can use for loops or while loops. I'm going to do a quick demo with a while loop. I'm going to be using what's called a count controlled loop. Now there are two kinds of loops. There are event controlled loops and count controlled loops. An event controlled loop means that the loop is going to happen while an event is true or while an event is not true. A count controlled loop means that we're going to have something repeat for a certain number of times. Now, a count controlled loop is going to need some variety of counter, a check to see when we have hit that counter, and some kind of ending condition. So if we go into here, I know that I want to have a counter, so I'm going to create a counter, and I'm going to have that be 1. Then I'm going to create a while loop, and I'm going to say that while counter is less than 3, I want this to happen, so do this. And then once this has happened, I need to make sure that I add 1 to counter. So and then I want my loop to end. Now, what's happening here is I've created a variable called counter, and I've set it to 1. I could call this variable anything. While counter is less than or equal to 3, I want this to repeat, and then I have to make sure that I increase counter by 1. So now, hopefully, what'll happen when I run this is it'll say 2x2 hands of blue twice. Now, let's look at why that happened. So if I have my variable starting at 1, my loop is going to happen when this variable is less than 3. If I wanted this to repeat 3 times, I would say less than or equal to 3. I have to make sure that I increase my counter at some point within my loop to make sure that when the loop needs to end, it will, because if I don't change counter at all, what'll happen is as I'm going through my loop, I'll have counter at 1. While 1 is less than 3, it's going to echo 2x2. But if I don't have this, it just does this again. While 1 is less than 3, and then I'll end up with an infinite loop. By adding in this addition, I'm giving it the ability to keep track of how many times it's gone through the loop. So if I wanted to say add 1 more to this, what I could do is go up here and say instead of less than, I want it to be less than or equal to 3. And then when I run this, it's going to repeat 3 times. So you can see the important pieces of the loop is going to be the counter, increasing the counter, having an ending condition, and this was an example of a while loop. Now there are actually other ways that you could do this. Let's say, for example, I actually wanted to change this to be a for loop instead. Well, what I can actually do for that is get rid of some of this. I still need to have the increase for counter, but I can actually say for I in sequence 1, 3. So what'll happen here is hopefully when this runs, it will create a variable called I. It's going to be I 1, 2, 3, and then it will go through and, oops, my apologies, I accidentally left in a line I didn't need. It will go through the sequence and it will repeat this several times. So let's see if that works. So we can see that this is another way that we could have this go through 3 times. Now there are actually other changes that you could make to this. You don't have to call the variable counter. You don't have to call the variable I. So when we are looking at the while loop version, I've chosen to call it counter, but you could call it anything. You also don't have to have this be an actual number. You could actually have that be a variable where you ask the user what you would like, as in how many times would you like this loop to run through, and you can actually change that number to be that variable. In a for loop, because we're doing this using a sequence, I actually have slightly less code that I have because I don't have to set a variable counter. I'm setting the variable I right in the beginning of the for loop. And because I'm using a sequence, I don't have to worry about the addition. Now, these are the 2 most commonly used loops that you'll see. There is also something called an until loop, but I'm mostly skipping past that because I think that's a little bit more than you really need to worry about. If you have any questions or problems, please let me know.